Tansei, welcome to another weekend wrap-up edition of APTN National News. I'm Chris Nachkate. Thanks for joining us. Treaty 8 First Nations were in Ottawa on Thursday morning to voice their opposition to a memorandum of understanding signed between Ottawa and Alberta. Part of that MOU is a proposed pipeline from Alberta to the west coast of British Columbia. The MOU was signed last month by Prime Minister Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. The federal government has taken heat for not consulting coastal First Nations or the BC government before signing the MOU. The Treaty 8 chiefs say they were also not consulted, along with some members of Ottawa's Indigenous Advisory Council on major projects. Terry Villebrun is the acting chief of the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation in northern Alberta. She says the community is staunchly opposed to any pipeline project for this and other reasons.
No to increasing production of tar sands by 100 million barrels a day. No to increasing toxic tailings in our backyard. No to lifting the tanker ban on the West Coast. And no to Pathways carbon capture. And no to the MOU within Alberta. We stand in solidarity with the coastal First Nations, and Prime Minister Carney would have known this if he had bothered consulting us.
It was a historic day at the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau, Quebec, just across the river from downtown Ottawa. A number of Inuit artifacts, including a sealskin kayak more than 100 years old, were unveiled to the public for the first time. This after they were transported from the Vatican in Rome to Montreal last Saturday. Once again, here's Fraser Needham.
Elder Daryl Nasugilak's descriptions brought this over 100-year canoe to life.
But this, you can see the actual wear marks, where a hunter, you can see that there's more grease on this side, so he was probably a right-handed guy. You can see beluga oil stains around the cockpit here.
They arrived in Montreal on Saturday and were transported to the museum on Monday. They'll be kept there for now, but Inuit Taprit Kanatami President Nate Nobed says this will not be their permanent home.
Well, there is a larger infrastructure piece that goes along with this story. And for Nunavut as a jurisdiction, even in the land claim agreement, there's consideration of the creation of a heritage center for that jurisdiction. That has yet to be realized. It would be wonderful if we could have museums and heritage spaces in each one of our 4 Inuit land claim regions so that we could get these items closer to our communities.
Canadian Museum of History President Carolyn Dramagai says storing the artifacts at the proper temperature is key.
So we have to really maintain them at a very stable level of humidity and temperature. And the belongings that we saw this morning, of course, are of organic material, which are extremely sensitive to variations of temperature and humidity. So ensuring that we're providing a stable environment for the items is very, very important.
This would have been a pouch for water. This would have been used for tightening or loosening a bow and arrow. This is a rope that was made most likely, I believe, by sealskin.
The Inuit Regional Corporation helped coordinate the transfer of the artifacts. CEO Dwayne Smith says the last few days have been a whirlwind of activity he won't soon forget.
We were very, very emotional. Just the significance of it, the magnitude of unveiling it, just similar to today. It still hits us because this is a part of our history, our culture, our identity, our heritage.
Most of the artifacts are First Nations. However, the Assembly of First Nations was not present at today's event. They plan to have their own unveiling ceremony sometime in January. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
A recent federal court ruling is putting the federal government in the hot seat. The ruling states that Canada has a legally binding fiduciary duty to provide adequate on-reserve housing. At the forefront were 2 First Nations, including one in northern Manitoba and the other in northern Ontario. APTN's TR Wheatley has more.
In this downtown Winnipeg office, the Ansinu Ugamawan Grand Council speaks about a recent landmark federal ruling about on-reserve housing.
They gathered evidence of moldy homes, frozen pipes, families in tents.
St. Teresa Point Chief Raymond Flett, the main plaintiff in the class action, says his community and many others have faced generations of broken promises dating back to the treaties.
Treaty leadership means fighting smart, fighting long, fighting together.
On December 5th, Justice Paul Favel ruled that Canada owes a legally binding fiduciary duty to provide adequate on-reserve housing.
Not to accept federal crisis response when Treaty 5 promised prevention. Not to settle for emergency measures when our elders deserve dignity. Not to watch another generation breathe black mold.
Known as the National First Nations Housing Class Action lawsuit, it had over 100 reserves opt in. In his decision, Favel said, homes on reserve are, quote, poorly constructed, unquote, and that many lack running water or sewage systems. Favel reviewed about 1,200 pages of evidence, including hearing from a dozen expert witnesses and a couple of dozen people who lived in the poorly constructed homes. Sandy Lake Chief Dolores Kakagamic was the co-plaintiff.
This is a victory for all First Nations. The court has said that it's time we work together. We invite Canada to do the right thing. Prime Minister, quit fighting us on this and build with us.
While this ruling is positive, the Ansinu Nation, more commonly known as the Island Lake region, is facing another crisis. Grand Chief Alex McDougall says the 4 isolated communities are facing a hepatitis A outbreak.
Higher prevalence of Hep A in Garden Hill currently. I think we had 89 confirmed cases, a fatality, and we have a number of cases in all of the Island Lake communities going through the same numbers.
Meanwhile, the federal government has 30 days to appeal the decision, something the Ansinu leadership say they've prepared for. However, if the feds don't appeal, the lawyers working this class action suit say they can start working on stage 2 by February, where they will determine Canada's breach of its duties on a First Nation by First Nation basis. T.R. Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thanks, TR. Inuit organizations are disappointed in Canada's latest attempt to reissue fishing licenses to a non-Nunavut company owned by 7 Mi'kmaq First Nations. And as APTN's Justin Hardy tells us, the federal government first attempted this in 2021, but that decision was set aside.
The Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada is once again recommending to the minister that she reissue fishing licenses to FNC Quota as part of the purchase of Clearwater Foods. FNC Quota is owned by a coalition of 7 Mi'kmaq First Nations. In 2021, DFO proposed to reissue the licenses, which covers waters near Nunavut, to FNC Quota, and then Minister Bernadette Jordan signed off on the reissue. Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated and Qikiqtani Inuit Association challenged that decision. In 2024, a federal court judge ruled the ministry failed to meet the special considerations of Nunavut under the Nunavut Agreement and that the decision was unreasonable. Canada was ordered to review its 2021 decision, but the licenses remain valid until a new decision is made. Last week, the DFO once again recommended reissuing the licenses. According to QIA President Oleu Kakisuk, this leaves Inuit to wonder how Ottawa can claim to be implementing reconciliation while ensuring that the wealth from Inuit waters continues to flow south. Akisuk goes on to say Inuit access to the commercial fishery still significantly trails the access enjoyed by southern jurisdictions. This has tangible impacts on Inuit and Nunavut's economy and undermines Canadian security in the Arctic. Nunavut MP Lori Idlout also raised the issue in the House of Commons.
Nunavut's fishery is an underdeveloped economic engine, as QIA keeps saying. As a result of Liberal decisions, BC and Newfoundland hold more than 80% interest in their coastal fisheries, but Nunavut gets only half. Fisheries infrastructure like the deep sea force in Qikiqtaq is left unfinished. Will the Liberals finally treat Inuit like a full economic partner so they can benefit from local resources?
Minister of Fisheries and Oceans Joanne Thompson says the DFO push to reissue the licenses to FNC quota is only a proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to reassure my colleague across the aisle that the conversations are still happening, no decision has been made, and I encourage the participation as we move forward before making a decision.
The QIA says that if the feds follow through, they'll be undercutting Nunavut's economy and Inuit economic well-being for another generation. The association says it's exploring its options and will address its concerns in early 2026. Justin Hardy, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
The First Nation at the center of a major mining disaster in the Yukon is now taking the territory and Canada to court. The nation has long called for what it says is government accountability in the incident, claiming a lack of oversight contributed to the disaster. And as APTN Sarah Connors tells us, the nation says it's had enough with governments failing to uphold its treaty obligations.
The First Nation of Nacho-Nayakdun is suing the territorial and federal governments over alleged negligence in the Eagle gold mine disaster and of violating their treaty obligations. It's also seeking $150 million in damages. The First Nation filed its statement of claim in Yukon Supreme Court on December 9th. The Eagle gold mine is located on Nacho-Nayakdun's traditional territory. A heap leach failure at the mine last summer released hundreds of millions of liters of cyanide-contaminated solution into the surrounding environment. The First Nation has long claimed the territory failed to properly regulate the project.
This disaster has unleashed cyanide and other toxins into our traditional lands, our waters, and we're still grieving this disaster.
They're also accusing the territory of dragging its feet on land use planning while continuing to approve mining projects on their traditional territory. The First Nation says that's a violation of its treaty rights. The lawsuit calls for a temporary pause on new mineral staking on its traditional territory.
We have to hold public government accountable to their breaches of our treaty.
We reached out to both governments for comment, but did not hear back by airtime. This marks the second lawsuit filed by a First Nation against the territorial government in less than a week. The Tronagwichan First Nation is also suing the territory over alleged treaty rights violations. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
People in the Northwest Territories are finding new ways to house the homeless. That story after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The city of Yellowknife will be opening its doors to a facility armed with programs and services they hope will offer a way out of homelessness and into permanent housing and employment. Our APTN reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs gives us a tour of the new facility.
Anyone entering this facility has a clear, supported plan and pathway.
A path forward that doesn't end at a shelter bed. That's what this new transitional housing facility on the outskirts of Yellowknife will offer 24 Northerners.
The facility will offer residents privacy, stability, and a safe environment to focus on life skills, case management, and long-term planning.
The territorial government is contracting the Yellowknife Women's Society to operate the space, which will serve clients who find themselves between emergency shelters and permanent independent housing. Arlene Hache is the Society's interim director. She says respect and representation are non-negotiable, born from lived experience.
Every person moving into this building will have an individualized plan that will talk about, their strengths, challenges they're facing at the moment, and then the steps they need to take to move out.
Scheduled transportation will be available between the site and various areas of Yellowknife. The facility includes a kitchen and a walk-in fridge and freezer, a dining room, a gathering space, office and training space, laundry room, private bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, and even a honeymoon suite. Well, not quite, but the Society is adamant to meet the clients where they're at.
Well, yeah, a lot of people don't go into shelters because they're couples. That's right.
The facility is also rethinking how gender is understood within emergency and transitional spaces. Even as the organization's name shifts, the cultural learning continues.
You might know the Young Life Women's Society is actually recreating itself to reflect what we do, which is to support all genders.
According to the most recent point-in-time count, over 90% of those experiencing homelessness in Yellowknife identify as Indigenous.
Like, how long do you expect the transition to take place?
Thanks to partnerships with other organizations, residents at the transitional housing facility.
It's a mistake to even talk about a time limit for anyone.
Will have access to mental health and cultural supports and training programs like digital and literacy skills and job readiness. But a central question remains. Where will clients move out to? Hache says transitional housing only works if there are viable, sustainable options beyond its doors.
So we have to do a lot of work, in my opinion, with landlords. We are looking at different other housing options for permanent housing and affordable rent.
Yellowknife Women's Society received $5 million from the GNWT for operating the facility from December 2025 till April 2028.
Housing is a right. This is an essential service, and it's money well spent.
Meanwhile, first things first, move-in date is anticipated for December 15th. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Nova Scotia is known for all kinds of storms, which blows over trees that in turn contributes to wildfires. A Mi'kmaq community is preparing for next year's fire season with new technology that aligns with Mi'kmaq values. APTN video journalist Angel Moore reports.
Jamie Lee Gihu is from the Sabaganagati First Nation. She is the community's emergency measures officer and stopped by the BioBurn Pros demonstration, a new partnership to help protect her community from forest fires.
Once I got the assessment done from FireSmart and I seen the results and I seen how much of a high risk we actually are for wildfire, I just took the initiative to find somewhere that somebody could help us mitigate and create a mitigation plan to help us minimize our risk to fire.
BioBurn has mobile burn chambers that can be deployed to a site where wood debris is burned at a high temperature so it is smoke-free. About 8 tons of wood can be burned per hour, important for a province where storms can leave behind a massive amount of wood debris, potential fuel for a forest fire. Joe Lewis is the president of BioBurn Pros and says the byproduct of the burning is returned to the earth.
And that value is through biochar. That's what's left at the end of the burn, is just the char. We've come to find out that that char will actually retain carbon back into the ground for decades, and it helps protect against drought. So then the soil is more resilient in fire times. The plants are more resilient as well.
Sabaganagati First Nation is the first community to partner with BioBurn Pros, and Lewis welcomes working with more First Nations.
So we come to find out that not only are we preventing fire, we're giving back to the earth. And again, being stewards of the land and giving back to the earth is at the core of the values of the First Nations. And they've seen a great marriage between what we do as an operation and what they believe in as a community.
Gihu is impressed and says the technology aligns with Mi'kmaq beliefs, taking care of the land.
They not only burn smokeless, but they create a substance called biochar, which can be returned back to the earth, and it's something that we can benefit from it.
Gihu says the fire prevention project will include a fire break and provide employment.
I will be hiring people within my community to do the inside of the community, because these guys are going to be doing the perimeter of my community to create a fire break around the entire perimeter. So our community members will be doing the mitigation work on the inside of it.
Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabutuk, also called Halifax.
Our 12 Days of Indigenous Languages is up next. Plus, we'll give you an update this upcoming season of Hockey Night in Canada in Cree and Inuktitut. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. All week we've had our Christmas language segment counting down the work days till we are all on holidays. Here's one of those segments from this week. Francine Bearhat brings you some Blackfoot teachings from the Siksika Nation.
Idamik skinotuni, nistu anako nati pudaki, nitumtu tu Siksika, nina makoyukina nixista na a notukwel, nohkoix, Ikskima ki masamautan ki sakui sakumapi ki matsuki tupi and ki nitana istotan. I am vice principal here at Chief Olson School, Natu Sapi and Siksika Nation. The whole idea of coming together with family, Niksukuwiks, which are my relatives. So a lot of times with the holiday season, our relatives come together and we share moments and joy. Niksukuwiks means my relatives, and that is just basically who we are and where we come from. Having our own school board, we like to incorporate more traditional values. Another word I'd like to introduce to you is Gasanonics, and that is my ancestors. So Gasanonics is when we come together with our family. I used to teach grade 5 and 6 social studies, and I would often introduce them. We'd do family trees, and I would with Niksukuwiks, our relatives, and a lot of our kids really didn't know, especially those who were in the system, were not with their families and were with kin, but they really struggled with their family trees. And I'd often say, okay, just draw them because they were there. You may not know who they are, but they know you. We pray to our ancestors. I would say more holiday season, but it's got to be a daily occurrence is Gitsigakumim. Gitsigakumim means I love you. Tying that with our family, our relatives, and our ancestors, and just telling us, because again, with that whole intergenerational trauma, a lot of our people, we didn't know how to express our love or how to say it.
And make sure to tune in Monday to see what language will feature next. As 2026 is just around the corner, that means we have an all-new season of Hockey Night in Canada in Cree and Inuktitut. You can watch your favorite teams battle it out on the ice with live commentary from our expert hosts speaking in languages Indigenous to these lands and where the modern sport was created. Get out your calendars. Here's the schedule for 2026.
Watch David Nyungen, Puju Kusigak, and Robert Kvitok analyze 3 games in Inuktitut. Starting January 10th, the Vancouver Canucks are in Toronto against the Leafs. January 31st, the New Jersey Devils play the Senators in Ottawa. And February 28th sees the Calgary Flames elbows up against the Kings in Los Angeles. For you Plains Cree speakers, catch Clarence Iron, Earl Wood, John Chabot, and Jason Chamakis with their play-by-plays on March 14th for the San Jose Sharks against the Montreal Canadiens. The Vancouver Canucks battle the Calgary Flames in Calgary on March 28th, and finishing April 11th with the Philadelphia Flyers against the struggling Winnipeg Jets just across the street from our studio. Join in on the fun to help revitalize Indigenous languages.
And that's all the time we have for your weekend edition of APTN National News. From our HQ in downtown Winnipeg and from our reporters from across the country. Mi Gwetch Hai Hai Kwana. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again on Monday. Ekse.